New election results out of 2 GOP primaries are giving us a clearer picture of Donald Trump's lasting political influence. While the former president's pick for Nebraska governor lost his election race, perhaps because of some troubling sexual assault allegations, Trump's endorsement proved to be effective in West Virginia, where his pick for Congress, Alice Mooney, made his opponent the first congressional incumbent to lose re-election this year. Those results, as well as several wins in Ohio and Indiana last week, underscore a big reason why top Republicans may have remained by Trump's side despite 2 impeachments, a whole insurrection that many of them actually condemned. And new audio from the New York Times and reporter Jonathan Martin from his upcoming book, This Will Not Pass, highlights that hypocrisy. Take a listen to what South Carolina Senator Lindsey Graham said about Donald Trump in the wake of January 6th.
He's misjudged the passion. You know, he plays the TV game, and he went too far here. That rally didn't help. Talk about, primarying us, and he created a sense of revenge.
He created a sense of revenge. And joining me now to help break this down, MSNBC legal analyst Joyce Vance. She's a former U.S. attorney and co-host of the Sisters-in-Law podcast. So, Joyce, what's your reaction to the new audio that's been released? How is it possible that so many Republicans are on tape saying the opposite of what they've been telling the American public since 2020?
I suspect no one is more surprised than these Republicans that they've gotten off scot-free for this monstrous level of hypocrisy that they've all displayed when it comes to the former president. You know, what's clear is that they cherish power a lot more than they cherish the country, that they are so willing to discount the intelligence of their voters that they believe that they can get away with maintaining this two-faced sort of approach where they're privately critical of the former president but consider to support him publicly because of their own future political interests. And I think it will be up to voters at the polls during the midterm elections to make those of them who are up for re-election to hold them accountable and to say that they will no longer tolerate this hypocrisy. But whether that actually is going to happen, Zerlina, I think is a wide open question.
It's definitely a question how all of this information will be processed in the minds of voters. But when it comes to investigators at the Department of Justice, Joyce, how does this new information fit into what we already know about the potential conspiracy here?
So I don't know that this evidence is suggestive of conspiracy. I think it suggests that there are many people who should have subpoenas to testify in front of grand juries to talk about what they knew, when they knew it, and perhaps most importantly, what conversations they had with the former president and those who were close to him. But what's critically important and what one hopes DOJ understands is that no matter the distaste and the concern about openly investigating and perhaps prosecuting a former president, they are out of options. And it's very clear that not only was there a plan to violate the will of voters in 2020, there is a serious risk that it will happen again in 2024 and perhaps be more successful if these people are not held to account. And frankly, the institution in government that holds the responsibility for accountability is the Justice Department. It's great that there are county district attorneys in states who have open investigations, most notably right now Fani Willis in Fulton County, Georgia. But primary responsibility for an effort to interfere with an election is something that merits investigation and prosecution as appropriate by the Justice Department.
In terms of the other investigations, you have the congressional investigation in the committee. They've obtained new emails from Donald Trump's attorney, John Eastman. They're from his time as a professor at the University of Colorado, where he lays out exactly how legislators in Pennsylvania can challenge their election results back from 2020. I mean, what stands out to you in the latest batch of emails? It feels a lot like the more we see these conversations and them discussing all the angles with which they can try to overturn the results, it's clear they understand that what they're talking about is not lawful.
I think that's absolutely right. John Eastman is laying out a criminal scheme to interfere with an election in these emails. He's saying, okay, we've lost, but here are some schemes that we can run so that we can actually pull out a victory. He is, not an uneducated person. He's a well-educated lawyer, clerked for a federal judge along the path to his career. And he is someone who appreciates that when you're talking about pulling out pieces of evidence that are suggestive of fraud when you know, in fact, that fraud did not occur. And when you're manipulating rules to try to create this just sort of absolutely monstrous sort of way of saying that the numbers should suggest something that they don't suggest in terms of outcome, this is just a roadmap for crime, and it should be treated like a roadmap for crime. And people who were involved, people who were either part of a conspiracy to engage in this or who attempted to interfere with the election need to be held accountable. We are running out of time.
So it's essentially the same question I asked you about the audio. How do these emails fit into the larger conspiracy investigation at the DOJ? I mean, this is the committee getting these emails, but I'm assuming they will also be available to the Department of Justice doing this parallel of sorts investigation.
They're certainly available to the department. Of course, the big unknown is what the department is doing. It's hard to believe that they're engaging in anything short of a full-force investigation into efforts to subvert the election. And these emails are important because these are some of the receipts. If there's a smoking gun in this situation, these emails really are the smoking gun. They are a laid-out criminal conspiracy to interfere with an election. They would be admissible in a jury trial, most likely.
Joyce Vance, thank you so much for your analysis. Please stay safe.
Hi, I'm Zerlina Maxwell. Thanks for checking out our channel on YouTube. You can see more from Zerlina by clicking any of the videos on this screen, and make sure you subscribe below to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. Thanks for watching.